48 communities and other ancestral authorities in Guatemala will demonstrate to demand the resignation of the Attorney General and other members of the Public Prosecutor's Office and the justice system. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrived in Russia as he pays an official visit to the Eurasian nation until September 21st. Heavy rains in the northwest of the Democratic Republic of the Congo caused a landslide that killed at least 18 people. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. World leaders are participating in the high-level political forum of the 78th General Assembly of the United Nations Organization, focused on the Sustainable Development Goals starting on Monday. The meeting will last until Tuesday, September 19th. The meeting will be held at the organization's headquarters in New York City, United States. Among the central issues to be discussed by the leaders of the 190 member nations are climate change, the war in Ukraine, and in the economic, humanitarian and security crisis facing the world. During his speech, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, stressed the need to generate a global plan focused on rescuing the Sustainable Development Goals. And taking part at the high-level political forum of the 78th General Assembly of the United Nations Organization, focused on the Sustainable Development Goals starting on Monday, the President of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, offered his remarks on the main topic of the gathering. The head of state said the reports prepared by the Secretary General contain irrefutable figures that reflect a rather grim reality, and even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the world was already off track towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Díaz-Canel also stated that the midterm review of the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development is taking place at an extremely critical juncture in which developing countries face multiple challenges and an unjust economic order that perpetuates inequalities. Regarding this topic, said that at the rate none of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals can be achieved, and warned that more than half of the agreed targets will be missed. The Cuban chief of state said that what is urgently needed is a political will to truly leave no one behind and overcome one of the most complex crises humanity has ever experienced in modern history. He concluded by saying that that will be our best contribution to the common future that we need to build together. Previously, the Cuban president exchanged with diplomats on the results of the recently concluded G77 in China summit, a bloc shared for the first time by the Caribbean nation.
To have convened a summit of this magnitude at the present time in the midst of the situation that the world is facing and in view of the United Nations General Assembly was a great challenge. The one who thinks that Cuba is isolated has crumbled the argument without any bias of vanity or false pride. The country was at a tremendous height.
The Cuban head of state announced part of his agenda in which the Group of 77 will once again play an important role.
There is also a meeting of the Group of 77 that will give continuity to the one in Havana. We will work on the convocation that we will have for other events that are associated with the pro tempore presidency of the Group of 77, and in continuing to denounce the blockade and the inclusion of Cuba in the list of countries that supposedly support terrorism. I believe that is going to be a difficult and complex event, but we come with the decision that Cuba will also achieve diplomatic and political victory.
The President of the United States, Joe Biden, will propose a new reform to the United Nations Security Council in the 78th edition of the General Assembly of that high-level international body. As stated by John Kirby, the spokesperson of the National Security Council of the White House, during an interview conceded to a British media, the former military assured that his country will propose to take a look to the structure of the council. The addition of 5 or 6 new members could be one of the requests. The council is currently integrated by 5 members: China, Russia, United Kingdom, France, and the United States, which have the right to veto, and other 10 members with non-permanent status. Washington could greenlight the addition of Bharat, formerly India, Germany, Brazil, and Japan. Nevertheless, a draft with possible reforms to the United Nations is required to start the process. And the conflict between the U.S. automakers and their employees has entered a critical phase, confirmed Sean Fain, the president of the United Auto Workers Union. Fain asserted that General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, known as the Big Three, have no excuse for delaying the wage improvements demanded by their workers in virtue of the positive profit margin. The union leader affirmed that there are decades of lags, and if the employers fail to present better offers, they will extend the conflict just a week in which the Detroit International Auto Show begins. The union rejected a 21% increase and affirmed that they deserve the same as the executives, which reached 40%. A dozen Dominican organizations demonstrated on Saturday with a joint statement against the closure of the border with Haiti decreed by the government of the Dominican Republic. In view of this border closure action, the 12 organizations united to make known that they reject the warlike speeches and aggressive measures of the Dominican government based on the claim that the Haitian irrigation canal on the Massacre River is a detour of the river, which constitutes a natural border between the two countries. According to the statement of the 12 organizations, the action contradicts the official documents of the Dominican government, including the opinions of the National Institute of Hydraulic Resources, published in 2021, and the bilateral declaration of May 27th of the same year. The document states that the closure and militarization of the border will harm the poorest communities on both sides of the border. Hundreds of citizens took to the streets and squares of different cities in Haiti to demand the resignation of the Prime Minister Ariel Henry, who they hold responsible for the situation in the country. The mobilizations were called by the emerging party committed to development led by the former Premier Claude Joseph. Several social and political organizations joined the peaceful day that took place massively in Port-au-Prince, the capital of the country, and was felt in other areas, with more modest demonstrations. The demonstrators criticized the Prime Minister's management of the unprecedented wave of violence, the border conflicts, and the promotion of foreign intervention. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. 48 communities and other ancestral authorities in Guatemala will demonstrate on Monday to demand the resignation of the Attorney General and other members of the Public Prosecutor's Office and the justice system. The Municipal Mayor's Office explained in a statement that they will demand the resignation of Consuelo Porras, Rafael Curruchiche, and Freddy Orellana because they agree with the President-elect, Bernardo Arevalo, who points them out for interfering with the democratic process in reference to the general elections of 2023. The mobilization for democracy will arrive to Guatemala City, capital of the country. Colombia's Special Jurisdiction for Peace, the GEP or JAP, holds a hearing for Army soldiers who will admit their participation in false positives in the department of Casanare. The entity holds the hearing for former members of the Army's 16th Brigade who admitted their direct participation in 296 cases of homicides classified as false positives carried out between 2005 and 2008. The hearing is part of the process being carried out by the Truth Recognition Chamber on the case number 3, in which 24 people involved will admit their participation in war crimes and crimes against humanity they are accused of. The agency received versions of 104 witnesses. For 7 months, it prepared the hearings by interacting with the victims and the accused. Murders and massacres of social leaders and former FARC fighters in Colombia decreased during the first months of this year. This is the report elaborated by the Observatory of Human Rights of the Institute of Studies for Development and Peace in the past. The information, supported by the National Protection Unit, refers that there is a decrease of 22% in the murders of social leadership reference with respect to 2022. The same happens with the executions of ex-guerrillas that have decreased by 17%, while the massacres registered a decrease of 18% when comparing the period with 2022. In the past, recognizes improvements in the situation but affirms that there is still much to do. The government of Bolivia rejected a memorandum sent by the United States, which accuses the Andean country of failing to comply with its obligations to combat drug trafficking. Washington has included Bolivia in the list of countries with the highest levels of production and transportation of narcotics, along with 20 other nations. The United States has urged the Bolivian government to implement measures to reduce the number of coca crops that exceeded the legal limits. Officials define these acts as political, assuring that the North American nation should focus on addressing the illicit drug consumption crisis in its territory, which affects at least 39 million people. The authorities described the document as unilateral for having a geopolitical intention that is far from the sovereignty treaties. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, presented a 10-point plan to alleviate the migration crisis in Italy, but several members of the Eurobloc rejected or present conditions for its fulfillment. Poland has rejected the plan, calling it a diktat and not a pact. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki stated that his priority is the security of the country. France, too, does not fully welcome the proposal as it commits to help Italy with border controls, hard expulsions of undocumented immigrants, but will not accept any asylum seekers from the island of Lampedusa. Although the pressure has eased on the Italian island, residents consider the initiative a resounding failure. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrived in Russia as he pays an official visit to the Eurasian nation until September 21st. The head of the Communist Party's Central Foreign Affairs Commission office has already met with his counterpart Sergei Lavrov. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry, during his stay, the head of Chinese diplomacy will attend the 18th round of Russia-China strategic security consultations. They will also discuss issues related to the regional and global security situation. The Chinese Foreign Minister is coming from a meeting held in Malta with the Secretary Antony Blinken, where they also discussed the peace plan for Ukraine. We move on to other topics. On Sunday night, the Russian anti-aircraft defense eliminated a Ukrainian drone over the southwest of the Crimean Peninsula. The troops shot down the drone at around 21:30 local time. There are almost daily Ukrainian drone attacks on facilities located on the Russian territory, both in the areas near the front line and on the outskirts of Moscow. Air defense systems also destroyed a drone in the Belgorod region. Russian areas bordering Ukraine, such as Bryansk, Kursk, and Voronezh, regularly report projectile impacts, drone incursions, and various attacks from across the border, so their residents have to move temporarily to prevent greater risks. Despite measures of economic aggression against Moscow, the United States has imported $944 million worth of fertilizers from Russia so far this year. According to Russian media, in 2023, the United States reached a new record in fertilizer imports from Russia, despite a drop in purchases of nearly 40% in July compared to the same month in 2022. According to this data, imports from Moscow are the second most important for supplying the U.S. agricultural market, behind Canada. The United States and the European Union are advancing a policy of sanctions and reduction of imports from Moscow, a reason why Washington keeps a 22% reduction of its fertilizer imports from Russia so far in 2023. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at TeleSUR English, and there you will be able to re-watch our interviews, the top stories, the special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. We have a final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back. The government of Libya announced that special measures will be taken in order to aid survivors after Tropical Storm Daniel hit the country. The government of the National Unit announced a set of measures to aid survivors after the devastations caused by Tropical Storm Daniel, which has left over 11,300 casualties in the eastern city of Derna. The tragedy took place on September the 10th after the two dams collapsed due to the heavy rains brought along by the storm. On the other hand, the humanitarian agency informed that 170 people lost their lives in the country as a result of the heavy rains which resulted in flooding. Citizens keep on searching their loved ones with the hope of finding them alive, or at least identifying their bodies to bury them. On Sunday night, heavy rains in the northwest of the Democratic Republic of the Congo caused a landslide that killed at least 18 people. The tragedy occurred along the Congo River in the village of Lizal, which belongs to the province of Mongala. The Civil Association forces reported that the victims lived in houses built at the foot of the mountain, and they warned that the rain caused heavy damage and buried under the mountains of mud the populated areas so that the number of victims could increase in the following hours. Cesar Limbaya, the governor of the province, has requested urgent machinery to clear the walled areas and rescue as many survivors as possible. In Iran, authorities reported at least 7 injured after the floods generated by the intense rains affecting the country. The head of the search and rescue organization, Bibak Mahmoudi, said that one of the 7 injured was taken to a medical center for proper care. He also pointed out that the flooding is taking place in the coastal province of Gilan, in the northwest of the country, causing damage to infrastructure in 3 cities and other towns in that state. The official also said that 12 operational teams with 60 rescuers were sent to the area to carry out rescue work. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.